Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and a very warm welcome to the inaugural edition of the Digital Bharat Economy Conclave 2023, an initiative by Financial Express Digital. Digital Bharat Economy Conclave has been designed on the theme of building a digitally led economy. Before we start, we would like to thank our presenting partner Google, silver partner Suzy, and celebration partner Radico Khaitan. We would also like to thank our industry partner Tide NCR and exhibitor Param Network. We request you to remain connected with us throughout the course of the day via social media led by hashtag DBC 2023. I now request Anant Goenka, Executive Director, the Indian Express Group, to please come on stage and share a few words with us. Okay. May I please take this opportunity to invite Rishi Raj, Executive Editor. I request Mr. Anant Goenka, Executive Director, the Indian Express Group, to please come up on the stage and share a few words with us.
Last time I had the honor of introducing Rajeev, Chandrasekhar ji, and we spoke about technology, was almost exactly 8 years and 2 weeks ago in Goa. Rajeev ji at that time spoke very passionately about technology, and that's because he and I both shared passion for technology. But he was actually, he's so qualified as a techie himself, right? He's an electrical engineer. He's got a master's degree in computer science. He was part of the core team that designed the i486 processor when he worked at Intel. And when we sat down to discuss tech, it was 1 year into his government, the BJP government. It was in Goa at Technology Sabha. And you know, we spoke about digital India. It was shaping up as a vision back then. And I think I remember distinctly at that time that he understood the value of user data well before anybody in government was even talking about it. It's now become a cliche to say that that data is a new oil. In fact, it's a debate, is data the new oil and all that. But back then, yeah, I remember we spoke about it back then very clearly. And Rajeev ji, what a long way we have come in the last in those 8 years. So I won't give too long an introduction, but I'll say that we are waiting to hear from him to talk about the Digital India Act, the new Digital India Act, how that's going to replace the old IT Act, about India AI. The fact that we're even talking about India AI so quickly after AI has become ubiquitous is in itself, I think, an achievement. The India stack is already well established, it's well respected and appreciated across the world. We're talking about languages, Digital India Bhashini, something that he's been talking about, and that there's a lot to talk about, a lot that's happened from the government side. I'm looking forward to this conversation. Rajeev ji, if I can invite you to join us and enlighten us in all these areas. Sorry. So firstly, my apologies for being a little bit late. I just had a flight got delayed by 2 hours in the morning, so I just kind of ran in. I normally factor in 1.5 hour delay. And the reason it got delayed is because the pilot wasn't him. So I don't know how many of you all know, but he's an aviator, and we both share a passion for aviation, although he's a much more accomplished aviator than I am.
No, I just want to interrupt there. Usually, politicians are the ones that are blamed for the late start of a meeting. So it's good that I get an option to say the media held us up this morning. No, but just a joke.
So Rajeev ji, you know, 8 years and 2 weeks ago, we spoke about technology. So much has changed since then. But I think, you know, that time you were just grappling with sort of what digital India will be. You know, and I'm very tempted to give you to start with the full toss and tell us what has changed in the last 8 years and 2 weeks. But I won't do that. I'll go to one thing very specific. Specifically, I thought 8 years ago, my view was that technology being brought into India, you know, technology was being brought into India on the backs of a few very, very large corporates. They were largely corporates that were from Silicon Valley, a place where you spend time yourself. And I think more than dealing with technology, we were trying to process how to deal with these companies. Is that a fair statement to make?
No, I think, Anand, 8 years ago, or even before, if you look at what we used to talk about technology, all of those who were interested, we all had a deep intuitive sense that technology is a force for good. Technology is going to change the way our future is going to unfold in front of us. So we had a lot of these macro 80,000 feet above sea level type of intuition and instinct about the power of good that technology would deliver. And then came along these big platforms who were not so big at that time, but certainly used this innate feeling and intuition amongst all of us that technology would do good, and so therefore they were harbingers of this good that technology is promised. And so we allowed them to grow, unfettered, because they, in a lot of ways, masqueraded and behaved as innovators and innovation on the move. And so therefore governments, people, citizens, all of us, media included, looked at this as a good thing. So if there was this social media platform that was in Palo Alto, California, or Menlo Park, or wherever, they said, look, we are giving you the power of search, we are giving the power of social media. There was really no narrative that opposed it in any way, excepting to say, look, give me more. So 8 years ago, if you looked forward at technology, all of these things that we are grappling with today, both opportunities and challenges, really didn't occur to us. We only saw technology being good, gooder, and goodest. So that was at a macro level. However, one of the big things that we started seeing a sign of 8 years ago when we spoke was that for the first time there was political leadership that was wanting to deploy technology not just for the you and me and the sophisticated Indian, but also for the Indian who was very far removed from government and governance and democracy, and that technology would in some ways transform their lives too. So that narrative was just beginning to take shape when we last spoke. Yeah. And today it's full-blown, almost a centerpiece of what Digital India is.
But tell me, when did these companies, because we're talking about them in a in a nuanced way now, when was that turning point, you think, when these companies became, not good or goodest, but when it became like, okay, we need to pause?
I've actually tried to do some homework on this and research on it, especially after I was given this opportunity to serve as a minister. And I think there was no single inflection point where suddenly the social media platform that was a warm, fuzzy place for all of us to meet and greet friends became this platform for user harm, doxing, gaslighting, and all kinds of new user harms. There is no sudden moment, and I've read the Plex, the Google story repeatedly. There was no sudden one moment where Google became something other than just convenience and a convenient way to crawl the internet. But certainly, over time, as they've become more and more profitable, they've become financially more and more powerful, they have also started becoming more and more powerful presences on the internet. And in many ways, these platforms have carved out islands where they are almost dominant. Yes. So there's a search island, there's a social media island, all of those islands. So those have, in a sense, crept on us without us really seeing the trend, seeing a pattern, seeing a design. And I don't think as well today, and I'm maybe being kind to them, that I don't think they set out to do this world domination either.
Yeah.
I think it just so happened that they became what they became.
I think they just grew so fast. Yeah, it's very difficult to then set the guardrails.
Exactly right.
But we must get into Twitter because that and Jack Dorsey's comments
seems to be a favorite topic one of these days. Yes.
So your relationship with Twitter also has been quite exciting. So you want to just, I don't know, I've just shared.
No. So look, I'm very candid on this and very clear on this. My relationship or the government's relationship with any platform is really simply through the prism of compliance with the law, compliance with the rule. So there is nothing personal, there is nothing adversarial against one platform or the other. But we consistently, including my predecessors and my successors, will certainly consistently ask for only one thing, which is that regardless whether you're big platform, small platform, foreign platform, Indian platform, that the respect for Indian laws is totally a an ask and an uncompromising ask on part of the government and the people of India. With Twitter and this recent controversy of Jack Dorsey's statement, and I think I called it out for what it is yesterday, it's an outright lie because at no time in the history, specifically in the 2020 period to 2022 period, has the government of India ever done anything to Twitter, despite the fact, and this is the irony of it, that despite the fact that platform was in violation of Indian law for a period of 2 years, that the government of India neither shut down Twitter, nor did it jail anybody, nor did it have any other punitive consequences imposed on Twitter. And it is ironical because, I use the word ironical because I have to quote inaction on part of the government against a violation of law to out a lie that Jack Dorsey has put out there. Why he's put it out there? Is it political season in the US? Is he trying to claw his way back into relevance? All of those questions he can answer. But certainly, without any fear of contradiction, what he has said is an outright lie.
But there is this level of swag or this level of irreverence that the Silicon Valley founders sort of carry with them.
Yeah, and I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that governments around the world have deified them for so many years. Oh, you are this great, creator, innovator, and therefore we consider you the god of the internet. And so, therefore, they have, in a sense, escaped oversight, escaped the demand for compliance with law for several years. Not just in India, by the way, it's all around the world. You saw that in the crypto space. You saw that in more recently the crypto space. So I think with Twitter in specific, one of the things that is quite out there in public domain, or two things that are there in public domain now, is that they believed that they were a sovereign entity and therefore the rules and laws of any nation didn't apply. And that, of course, we swiftly disabuse them of that. That in India, we are a democratic country. We live by the rule of law, and therefore, regardless of whether you are in San Francisco, or Menlo Park, or Bangalore, or Hyderabad, the rule of law applies to you as well. Number one. Number two, I think with the Twitter files, that then the exposure that we've seen in early 23 and late 22, it also has become very clear that these platforms require more oversight because of the kind of arbitrary and abuse of power and misuse of power that they exercise, either because they follow a particular political ideology or because somebody just wants to play God. So a lot of this stuff about Twitter that is now in the public domain reinforces the need for governments all around the world to have, including in India, to have very clear guardrails and do's and don'ts for these platforms that can exercise so much abuse of power if they're allowed to do so.
And the problem with that, Rajivji, is that, sometimes you wonder that how much of a gap and delay there is in laws and regulation catching up with the innovation. And it's always going to be a game of catch-up. We have to accept that.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, and we are now catching up for the last decade of not doing anything. And the whole world is talking. When I was part of the Indo-EU Trade and Technology Council meetings in Brussels recently, they are talking about the same things. What is the future of AI? How do we protect our citizens against misuse of AI? How do we deal with user harm on the internet? These are all questions that are looking for answers in capitals all around the world, not just in Delhi or not just in India. But I think what we are doing today is certainly, in a sense, signaling to the world that as the world's largest connected nation, as the world's largest single base on the global internet, that we are shaping the guardrails, and we are, through a process of consultation and engagement, trying to create a framework that other countries can follow as well. So I think the world is looking to India's leadership simply because we are the largest connected nation, and we are, in a way, approaching this in the correct manner is what I feel.
If we look back in the last 8 years, what you kind of would see, what I think is that America has done digital with innovation, China has done digital with imitation,
Sure.
and Europe has done digital with regulation. Is there one word that you think India will do digital with?
No, I use a phrase when I make presentations to students in university. I say that you know, digital leads India, India leads digital, and when I look at the young Indian in the audience, I say, you will lead digital India. So there are these three real things that are happening, that certainly the digital economy and innovation is going to be a much more bigger part, significant part of the overall economy. We were about 4% in 2014. We are close to 10% today. That is, digital economy is a percentage of GDP. And by 26, we will be 20% of the GDP, the digital component. So certainly, digital India will lead India. India will certainly lead digital in the world. I think today there is not one place in the technology ecosystem, one slice where India is not present. Quantum, semiconductor, microelectronics, AI, the internet, the consumer net, all of that, every bit of the technology ecosystem, India is present, Indian entrepreneurship is present, Indian startups are present, Indian research is present. So I think it is safe to say that for many decades, India was a consumer of tech. We sort of bought it. Yeah. When I was an entrepreneur, certainly in cellular, including the screw and the screwdriver were imported. And going forward, India will be, if not the leader, but certainly amongst the leading pack of nations that will shape the future of tech, that will shape future devices, future products, future solutions, and future software.
And if not India, certainly Indians will, because it seems that almost every major company has an Indian as a leader now in the tech world.
But I think, Anant, we are no longer happy with that. Yeah. We are no longer happy vicariously living through somebody else's success.
That's an important point.
Yeah. So no, I think that was certainly a narrative that we enjoyed for several years and decades. Enjoying the success of Sundar Pichai, enjoying the success of Satya Nadella, enjoying the success of Arvind Krishna at IBM. But I think now what we are saying is we want not just 108 unicorns, we want 1,000 unicorns. And we want the intellectual property, we want the creativity, we want the innovation ecosystem in India. And I just heard a quote, I think, from the Sequoia founder who said that, and Chamat, that India is one of the most exciting innovation ecosystems in the world for startups. Yeah. That is certainly what we want to focus on, rather than just living vicariously of other people's success.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that sort of I think about a lot is the correction in tech that's happening in America, and how much you think that will play out in India. Certainly, I think a lot of the big tech startups in India, unicorns, multi-unicorns, there is a certain correction. There is a certain correction in valuation.
Of course.
And that valuation correction does impact the jobs, the size of the organization. How closely are you watching it? Do you think it's overdue?
No, Anand, I think you followed tech for long enough. I have followed tech. I've lived in tech for long enough to know that if your nose is following just the valuation curve, then you're bound to keep doing this. You're just going to do this sinusoidal. But if you average out that, you see what the slope is across that, you'll see that there's been a consistent growth in value that is being created by the digital ecosystem around the world. There is consistent growth of the digital economy as a part of the global economy, as we are seeing in India as well. So if you just look at the trend line, it is solid growth despite all these occasional meltdowns you had in the early 2000s, where I was on the other side of a meltdown. Yeah. We saw the internet bubble burst. So those type of valuation corrections will always follow. I think now the hot thing is AI. Yeah. And so anybody who has an AI startup can command his value or her value. Semiconductor startups are now seeing, AI compute startups are seeing value. You see NVIDIA's valuation. Yeah. Just a few years ago, it was just another semiconductor company struggling to make gaming boards, high-performance gaming boards, and here they are now almost $1 trillion company. Yeah. So I think that is part of the technology ecosystem. As people see a certain trend, a certain new disruption, capital will fly towards there, bubbles will be formed, then it will correct. That is, in my opinion, part of the DNA of a technology ecosystem. Now, are many startups going bust? Are many people running out of capital to grow? Of course, and that is, again, in my opinion, the very nature of being in a startup ecosystem. That type of volatility, succeed or fail, is part of what startups are. I don't see anything dramatically different, excepting that post the Ukraine-Russia war, there is a certain risk aversion that has emerged for the equity class as a whole. And so therefore there is less capital that is running after private equity deals, or if they are running after it, they are because of demand supply rationalization, that the valuations have corrected.
Aren't you being too kind to this whole game? Because it sounds like a lot of these guys were getting valuation based on customers
Look,
and user acquisition, and then they had no bottom line. They disrupted industries, but they never landed their own business model.
No, Anant, look, when I certainly don't want to pick on any company or pick on any particular investor.
No, okay, I'll say the name. You're a minister, I'll say a name. I'll give a name like Byju's. You know, the largest valuation, largest startup in the country. I think the last valuation they did was $20 billion, $22 billion valuation. They raised money at that valuation, and then they're talking about raising debt. So when you're so big, does the government does it get concerned how many jobs will be on the street? Like in my industry, BuzzFeed shut down news. Quartz sold down for $1. Vox is in bankruptcy.
Look, on this particular area of an investee's bid and an investor's response to that, investee's ask and an investor's response to that ask, really governments cannot come into it. It's private capital going after private opportunity. So I don't think if like I say to people, even the Constitution even though it doesn't say it, there is a fundamental right for everybody to make mistakes.
Yeah.
So that applies to investors as well. So if somebody wants to make an investment based on a particular narrative or a deck that says, look, there is this untapped market for education is so big in India, and I have size and scale and market dominance for that market, and I think I can command a $20 billion valuation. And the other side, somebody says, okay, fine, I'm willing to accept that and write a check. Who's the government to come in the picture? So that will continue. I think that is the model. We will not certainly step in to arbitrate or moderate or intermediate on valuation. It's a private deal between two people who are all both mature. One has the money, one wants the money, and the twain shall do a deal.
Artificial intelligence. You were there. I had an opportunity to host and have a conversation with Bill Gates, and I asked him, "Are we ready for artificial intelligence?" And he said, "I don't think humanity will ever be ready." Was his immediate answer. Is India ready? Is the Indian government ready?
We are ready. We certainly, our approach towards artificial intelligence is what the Honorable Prime Minister has said almost 2 years ago. He said, India for AI and AI for India. And he said, AI has tremendous possibilities for the digital economy and for governance. And that is almost the North Star for us. We follow that. And we look at AI from a point of view, it being a kinetic enabler of our digital economy. It's a layer of what we are already doing with data, on what we are already doing with applications and the consumer internet. So, and we certainly today are in a position to bring to bear one of the largest and most diverse data sets in the world. Yeah. So the enormity of what India AI can be and the presence of India AI in the global AI scene I don't think will be trivial. It'll be pretty significant. And Sam Altman breezed through, as you know, Delhi recently.
Yeah.
And so I think everybody says the same thing. Now, on the issue of AI harm, where is AI going to disrupt jobs? And there are many narratives on this. Some just completely off left field on, it is going to completely destroy jobs, versus to the more conservative estimate that AI currently is at an early stage. It is only going to enable tasks, efficiencies, getting things done faster, getting things done with more intelligence, rather than replace humans, mimicking human behavior. Reasoning and human behavior, current AI models are far from it. So at what stage does AI certainly start replacing full jobs? I don't think today anybody who has a reasonable view of AI can say it will happen 5 years from now or 4 years from now. Because the current AI is very, very far from the AGI and the human reasoning and mimicking reasoning type of functionality that you need to replace human behavior or humans. But certainly today, in many job roles, AI knowledge using large language models, using chat GPT type models will become part of the skill requirement. So even if I'm just doing basic data mining in an organization, or I'm doing data entry, or I'm doing something, certainly it becomes now clearer that even in that low level function, you will need some AI skills. So what AI is doing in the, at least in the current context is putting the spotlight on reskilling the workforce, rather than this narrative, which I don't subscribe to, that it's going to certainly take away a whole set of jobs and replace it with models. I mean, I'm sure that all the AI startups want that to happen, but I don't think it's going to happen that fast.
No, I agree, and I mean, even in the newsroom, we had a long session recently. I managed to get the person in charge of AI for BBC News to do a session with us, and it was incredible. I think most people left that room feeling enabled more than threatened.
Yes,
I hope that was the mission. And so
I think certainly, to use that phrase of yours, I think that is certainly how we should use AI. Think of AI, that it's going to enable us and empower us more than what we think is possible, than threaten us at this stage. At this stage.
But Rajeev ji, Chat GPT, OpenAI, own Microsoft or Google's version of it, whatever, all these things, these are still from Silicon Valley. We still haven't found that one ubiquitous AI application coming out of India. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
And is that something that you know?
But we haven't found it out of Korea, Japan, the US.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
But I'm just saying that do we accept that somehow America will always be ahead in innovation?
Look, I worked in the Valley. I still maintain relationships in the Valley. Look, that is an innovation hotspot that nobody can take away from it.
Yeah.
At best, what we are trying to do today, or the rest of the world is doing, and India, I think, has the pole position on that, is that we can try and be a competing destination for innovation. But for us to assume that suddenly Silicon Valley is going to go to sleep, that's not going to happen. That's impossible. They have so much going for them, and one of the reasons that AI has succeeded as it has succeeded is the brute force AI compute horsepower that has been built by the Googles of the world, by the Microsofts of the world. You hear about how Microsoft has bought up all of NVIDIA's GPUs.
Yeah.
So AI is not just about innovation and numbers. It also is about billions of dollars of AI compute capacity. Yeah. And that they have built, they have invested in. And if you read the story about Google and Microsoft, and this book I always recommend reading, Genius Makers, Cadmet's. It's a brilliant book about how all these companies got into AI. And they talk about how they struggle to have the capacity. And if you want to explain why has ChatGPT happened when it has happened, why is AI suddenly beginning to take off, it is simply the AI compute capabilities that have now reached critical mass. And I think when Sam Altman was here, he talked about that. He said, look, you may have great data sets, you may have great innovators, you may have a great startup ecosystem, but you certainly need to also focus on the AI compute capability in India, capacity in India.
And how do we do that? How do we grow?
So we have to build those GPUs, we have to build, and CDAC, one of the entities in the government of India, METI, is now focusing on, in a sense, pivoting the high-performance computing, supercomputing mission to now focus on AI compute as their core application. So they are building that capacity. They're working with some of the world's leaders on that. And we need to have that AI compute capacity as part of India AI. And it is a very integral part of PM's vision for India AI, that AI compute capacity to be available to all the research institutions and researchers in India.
How much of all of this progress is dependent on our relationship with America? I think there's this ICET, which I was reading about to prepare for this actually.
Anant, I'll say it like this. I think every reasonable country today understands that the future of tech cannot be led by one country alone, excepting for China, who believes that they can do everything on their own. Pretty much all of the open societies and open democracies and countries of the world realize that the future of tech is about partnerships. So India and US have signed this amazingly futuristic MOU on critical and emerging technologies, which is the ICET. India and EU have entered into this Technology and Trade Council relationship where the EU and India is also working. And we have these relationships with Japan and the Quad as well. So I think the future of AI, the future of semiconductors, the future of electronics, future of these supply chains are all going to be, in a sense, driven by these type of partnerships. And I certainly think, you heard yesterday, I think the US ambassador to India and the National Security Advisor Rajeev speaking at the ICT conference, that AI, quantum, all of these areas, and semiconductor innovation, all of these areas we will see increased participation between Indian startups, Indian institutions, American startups, American companies, American institutions, and the European ones.
Basically, the idea is that it shouldn't be like the India-US nuclear deal. It should there should actually be more fruitful.
It'll be more of a partnership model. I think the fact that the realization that no one country can do everything. On the quantum hardware side, maybe the Americans and the Japanese can do it. On the quantum, on the software part, maybe the Indian startups and the Indian ecosystem can do it. So these partnerships are the way forward. And anchored by companies on both sides and with an enabling framework and support from the governments.
When government of India has an issue with platforms like Twitter, or at one point, the US government is famous for being very strong advocates for its corporates. They would really they'll bat aggressively for their organizations, whether it's Twitter, or whether it's Google, or whether it's famously Harley Davidson and Trump. I don't know what that was about, but. So does that complicate things for us, or is it very clear now established that our law is our law? And
advocacy for a particular company to have market access. Our government does it for our entrepreneurs. Every mission, every embassy of India anywhere in the world is an outpost for Indian commerce and Indian trade. So are the Americans, so are the Japanese, so are the Europeans. That is okay. And certainly no country that is a democratic country will ever say, please permit my company to violate your laws. Certainly that is not an ask that any country will make of India, and that is certainly not an ask that India will make of any other country as well. So it is.
But they might push you to say data localization, don't be so firm.
No, that is not law. That is certainly a policy. They may say, okay, well, don't do data localization. That's against cross-border data flow. We will negotiate this in the digital trade agreement. That's fine. That is negotiation. But I don't think the American government, nor will the European government, nor will the Indian government on a reciprocal basis say, allow our companies to go there and violate, for example, your H-1 visa requirements. We will not do that.
Of course.
Similarly, the Americans will never say, I don't think so, certainly not, that please allow company A or company B, that is a platform in your country, to violate Indian laws and give them diplomatic immunity or some other immunity. Certainly not. So that is never going to be. But that doesn't prevent countries from getting into bilateral discussions about what should be the nature of digital trade, what should be the basis of data movement, and that conversations are on anyway.
Does that complicate things a little bit though, when you see that the missions get involved more than before?
I think from our point of view, our government always operates on principles, especially in the digital space, at least to which I am privy to. We operate on principles, and then we discuss these principles, and if people disagree with the principles, then we will explain to them what our principles mean. For example, on the AI regulation part, I know that we were in a meeting recently with another country, and they were talking about use case regulation, and we were talking about user harm regulation. And they, at the end of the discussion, agreed that our approach towards user harm regulation is probably a better way to harmonize to the two countries' approach towards AI regulation. So that's the way we approach it.
Tell us a little bit about your Digital India Act that you've been championing, and why did you feel the need to replace the IT Act in the first place?
So multiple reasons, Anant. I think the government realizes, the Honorable Prime Minister realizes that the digital opportunity is a huge opportunity. The main law that underpins the digital economy is the IT Act, which is 23 years old. And certainly you and I can agree that 23 years old in the digital space is more than a couple of centuries old. So the time and the place for a new global standard legislation that can guide, enable our digital economy in the coming years is appropriate. It's here and now. And the Digital Act is in my opinion, a good framework for a forward-looking global standard cyber law. And for the first time ever in the history, we are pre-consulting the Digital India Act. That is, before we even put a pen to paper and have a draft, we are going out there and saying, these are the principles. This is what the Act intends to do. Please give us your view. And we've had 3 very, very, very deep pre-consultations with lawyers and users and companies and startups. And so it's a process that the Prime Minister keeps repeating, that when we legislate for the future, legislate with those who are the principal stakeholders of that legislation, which is the startups and the innovators and the consumers and the other ecosystem associated. So we are doing that. Hopefully by the end of this month, we will have a draft. And we will have a much more detailed discussion around the draft.
The payments that we have done, it is globally recognized. It's one of the most outstanding things that we have been able to create, I think, objectively speaking, because there's no question of monopolies in the whole payment space, which is not really the scenario in other parts of the world.
Absolutely. I don't know if you saw that Economist article about India's digital infrastructure on offer to the world and how that is part of our diplomacy and so on and so forth. And
in fact, I saw Japan asking to buy and use and license the
UPI.
stack. So, aside from payments, how accessible do you see the government making the India stack to private players?
Look, the India stack is available to private players. But the India stack solves a use case which is between government and a citizen. The private sector or the startups are involved in the developer ecosystem in terms of implementing it, executing it, customizing it. And because it is open source, any startup can play with that stack and say, I have a better version of UPI, I have a better version of DigiLocker, I have a better version of this. I have a version that works in Tamil, I have a version that works in... So you can create a security layer, you can create a language layer, you can create additional apps and functionalities on it. And we just had a DPS summit in Pune where 3 countries have signed MOUs where they want to implement the India stack in their countries. And the premise here, or the offer that the Prime Minister has made to the world, is that all the narrative around tech used to be about haves and have-nots. So the Western world would have all these fancy technology, and the poor countries, the global South, would basically continue their old-style governance. So we are offering all of this to the global South, LMICs, low and middle-income countries, and saying, look, here is an open-source platform. You can use the entire stack. You can use pieces of the stack. You can customize the stack. And the most compelling proposition for you is for countries that had zero or little of a digital economy, this can be the catalyst to creating an innovation ecosystem and innovators in your own country. So I think it's being received very, very excitedly by many, many countries. And we will see, I think, at least 10 to 12 countries implementing it very quickly.
Yeah. I think we should, I want to just get quickly into the manufacturing piece. I think, Tim Cook made a famous visit in the last month. Apple is this big sort of pride brand that we sort of talk about, operating out of India and manufacturing, assembling. How happy are you with the journey of smartphone manufacturing in India and other electronic manufacturing?
I don't think it's about me being happy. I think everybody in India should be extremely excited about these huge, large factories that have come into India. And today we are manufacturing and almost 100% of the mobile phones we consume in India. In 2014, 82% of all the mobile phones consumed in India were imported.
Yeah.
And the legendary shutting down of Nokia, where Nokia was made to run away from the country.
Tamil Nadu.
Yeah, Tamil Nadu. And today we have a situation where we are exporting, this year we would have exported 1 lakh crores of Apple and Samsung phones. And it is the fifth exported category of products from India. So this is a tremendous journey in just the last 8 years.
Fantastic.
And one of the things that Tim Cook said when he met me was that we are so deeply grateful or happy, the exact word I don't know, but that we were able to ramp up so quickly in India. And it is because of all the work that had gone into policy making and creating an enabling environment leading up to that. That 2019 onwards, they have just ramped up so fast. And they've had all of their EMSs come here and set up shop Pegatron, and I've been to all of those factories. And the amazing thing about this, Anant, is that those factories employ 74% women. And this is a tremendous story of empowerment that I always get very excited by. And these are all women from semi-urban, rural backgrounds who are today assembling a cutting-edge, world-class product
wonderful.
that is going to markets all around the world. It's just a brilliant story of transformation that I never tire of repeating.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. I'll just say one piece and then maybe take a few questions from the audience if you're okay with that. I'll just say one piece and this is just my just opportunity, but the e-waste is something that we are just, I know there's policy, but I don't think there's policing. I live in Mumbai. It's becoming the most polluted city in the world every winter now, the way it's going. And we have batteries and old cell phones and disposed diapers and banana peels all getting piled up in the same...
And plastic cases.
And water and dispose, and all gets piled up in the same landfill. And I'll just tell you, the average life expectancy of somebody who lives in Deonar, which is the largest landfill in Mumbai, is 40 years old. And the national average, I think, is 74. So I think this is one thing that, while manufacturing happens, I just wanted to park it with you.
It is certainly on our radar, and certainly during the G20 presidency, when we have talked about sustainability as one of the key goals, we are MeitY, as working with the Ministry of Environment, Bhupender Yadavji. We are certainly working out a plan on how to deal with and create the right amount of incentives and disincentives on e-waste management. So you'll hear about this fairly soon.
I'm sure. I'm happy. I'm sure with a techie like you and somebody who knows and seen the world, I know that you'll. So we'll take a few questions. Minister is kind enough to accept. Let me just start by asking Rishi, who, I'm sorry, I think I just overtook him running onto the stage. So Rishi, maybe I can ask you to start with a question in here. Rishi Raj is with Financial Express and he's been covering technology and telecom for many years. Is there a mic around?
But then everybody won't hear
it. Meanwhile, let me get a show of hands how many questions there are in the audience.
To keep pace with you is also a tough task. You gave an excellent, exposition regarding all the data, digital, the progress and the things which you are doing. That's all fine, but one of the risks which always creeps into this is everybody's data is now getting stored in some form or the other. Either, look at the government, this thing that there will be Aadhaar, if everybody shops electronically, so that data is, everybody's immense data is getting stored with somebody or the other. That's why you are coming out with bill. So what are the measures, where data leakage can be prevented? We just had that alleged COVID data leak, to which you responded that it's not a COVID, a breach has not happened COVID, but it was a past COVID data. That is A. B, the kind of measures which you have put in the data protection bill that, once it happens, when it becomes a law, there will be a penalty which will be this thing, and you have said that, even government will be liable to, or government agencies or PSCs, whoever, but they will also be liable to pay the kind of penalty. So if you could just explain if A, this kind of a thing, how did this happen and how can it be prevented? 2, tomorrow if this law comes, then how will this kind of breaches play out?
So first of all, Rishi, thank you for the question. Let me address the elephant in the room, the Coven story. And I want to be very clear on this, and I want to be very unambiguous. That so-called breach was not a breach of Coven. That data that the Telegram bot was throwing up was not from Coven. I'm emphatically repeating that so that nobody should mistake this and label this as a Coven data breach. Number one. Number two, I just want to explain to you how easy it is to mimic a breach. And we believe, and CERT is still investigating this, this database that the Telegram bot was throwing up the data from was a database owned by the person who owned the bot. So think of this as me, or you, for example, I'm the bad example here. if you sit down and create a database, and you create a bot, and that bot is throwing up data from your database. That is the second point I want to make. Third point I want to make is that that data in that person's database, which is what is being seen today when you access the Telegram bot, which is no longer, which has suddenly disappeared, that data is to large part fake. That means there are names, there are some telephone numbers, there are some Aadhaar numbers, but CERT has verified that at least a few of those entries that they have seen are fake. Now, assuming for a minute that there is some real data in that. Today, there is nobody in the room that does not agree or will not agree that Aadhaar data had been breached pre-2014 repeatedly. And pre-2014, there were almost 60 crore Aadhaar entries. And I have personally gone to Parliament and waived Aadhaar breach data. So, how old the data is, where did the data come from, how much of it is false and fake, and is this a deliberate attempt to mimic a breach, is being investigated. Now, I'll tell you, and I say this with all responsibility, it is so easy for me today to create, in 24 hours, I can create a bot on Telegram. I enter your number, Rishi, because I have your number on my phone, and that throws up some publicly known data about you. And I say that is an Indian Express payroll database breach. And you will be left defending yourself for the next 2 days, saying, no, but Indian Express payroll data was not breached. It is the simplest thing today to mimic a data breach and then create a corresponding narrative saying, no, breach ho gaya hai, ye ho gaya. I am certainly on behalf of the government of India, based on search findings, saying that that was not from any government database. And certainly not from the COVID database. Now, how did that person construct that database? From where did he get the data that he put and seeded into that database? That investigation will tell us. And we are not going to let up on that. We are going to certainly find out if that database exists, where is it? And in that database, is this real data or fake data? And we will make that public. But to mimic a data breach is the simplest thing for a 12th standard student with a little bit of coding capability to pretend that I have breached Indian Express database or I have breached somebody else's database. So that is number one. To the broader point on why are we so confident it is not a data breach, and we are making a lot of effort. We have made a lot of effort even before my time, my predecessor and his team and other ministries, to ensure that every app, every application within the government follows a standard protocol in terms of data storage, data security, data access. And that has been now made into a policy called the National Data Governance Policy, which is being approved by the cabinet, and that will be applicable across the government. So the government as a secure custodian of personal data or data, I have absolute confidence that we are going in that direction. Second is on the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, which is a legal framework. It will be hopefully introduced in the July session of Parliament. It is an absolutely well thought of, well-written bill that will create deep behavioral changes in everybody, private and public, private and government, in how they collect data, store data, manage data, and provide security for that data. So that deep behavioral change will be certainly as a consequence of the DPDP. And to those who say, no, the government, there's a cottage industry of people who want to create criticism about this. I only want to say that I don't deny them the right to criticize the government, but we have taken a lot of transformational steps to make sure that government as an entity, and as a consequence of the DPDP, private companies also will approach the whole issue of personal data with a big sense of responsibility and punitive consequences if they don't.
Is there any benchmark country that you think has done this well in terms of data storage, but
Look,
government-owned
I'll
data
tell you,
storage?
Anand, why it's so difficult for us to look at pure comparisons. We are a country that is
Sheer
size, and we are the world's largest per capita consumer and creator of data.
Yeah.
So the data intensity of the Indian digital economy is a totally different ballgame.
Yeah.
And the government today as an entity, unlike most governments in the world, is also a big custodian of data.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we are doing digitizing so many services. So
Yeah.
we have a plan. The plan is work in progress. But certainly on this particular debate, I want to say that it is not from the government.
Shamal, can I? Shamal's editor of Financial Express.
Morning. Just two small questions. One is that you talked about India being at the center of this digital ecosystem.
Right.
And also India will be a competing country to the Silicon Valley. Point is that with the kind of talent that is required, and India's, top engineering schools only provide a fraction of the talent that we require. What is the kind of discussion that you are having with India's top education institutions or the government on its own? What is the kind of initiative that you are planning to take? Because it's a real problem.
Absolutely.
The second question is slightly esoteric one. Do you think human intelligence can ever keep pace with the machine intelligence? Especially in the context of this artificial intelligence, chat, GPT, and etc., etc.
So let me give you a slightly funny answer to the second question. It depends on which political party that human is in. Certain political parties, the human intelligence will never be catching up with machine intelligence, especially those who are in the tourism circuit 60 times a year. So that's the question answered. But on a serious note, I think mimicking human behavior, getting to reasoning, which is what distinguishes a human being from a machine, our power to reason. There are different schools of thought. Jeffrey Hinton, the person who was a Google AI chief scientist and a great scholar, says it is around the corner. Sam Altman also believes it is around the corner. Other people think it's a little bit more difficult than going just around one corner. There'll be multiple corners. But it is a wait and watch game. But it is for our purposes today, because we are not AI scientists certainly, we are just consumers and observers of it, that it is going to deeply disrupt the normal is a safe assumption that we should live with. And that there are going to be many things around that corner that is unexpected and new and unreal. On the issue of talent, it is Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji's absolute number one priority and passion, which is to align all of these opportunities that are being created today by our effort, by the global trends, to what the youth of India can aspire to and can successfully pursue. And I'll give you one example of what we are doing, just to give you an illustration. In the semiconductor space, for example, 4 months, an entire group of world-class industry leaders and professionals sat with our academic establishment and have redrawn the curriculum, and that which is being implemented in the year 2023 across the country for developing 85,000 to 100,000 semiconductor, VLSI, materials, processing, engineers, design, manufacturing, etc., etc. So that is our approach, that academia, industry, government with funding and research institutions will create these talent pools around AI, around semiconductor, around quantum, around microelectronics, around all of these areas that we intend to pursue. So that is the model. And it is being rolled out, and there is almost a natural organic momentum for that, where the academic network is also engaging with industry. The METI as a catalyst for that is involved, and there is money that is being given in the budget to help this kind of talent being created. So that is certainly understood as a challenge, and we see it as an opportunity. Prime Minister sees it as an opportunity. So we are on that path.
Yeah. Can we get a question here? We'll take two at a time, please. So you start, and then followed by him, and then we go back. Please go ahead. Please keep it short. Keep your question.
Morning,
introduce
sir.
yourself.
Good morning, sir. This is Abhisar Sharma. I'm the CEO of NESL Asset Data, which is, of course, the next paradigm now, account aggregators, which is thanks to this progressive government. Sir, I think one thing I would like to say on your behalf here, heartiest congratulations. India today does 46% of the global real remittance, real transition, digital transition, which I think is amazingly big because of the kind of GDP we have and the kind of human capital we have. I think doing 46%, which includes, I mean, the remaining 5 countries, including the Chinas and the Japans and the South Koreas of the world, it's a very big achievement. So thank you for answering that COVID question also, because I think that is actually the elephant in the room as of now. And so one more request here, sir. You just mentioned that most of the, and all of us know that Mr. Arvind Krishna and several of them, like Mr. Satya Nadella, most of these global fortune tech companies today are run by Indians. So what can India do as a government, to try and ensure that, we have more of Indians as a reverse kind of, where people actually start contributing more towards their country as what they're doing to the Silicon Valley?
But that is happening. I want to certainly tell you that that is happening. I am seeing more and more the number of people, for example, from the Indian diaspora that are wanting to be associated with the India Semiconductor Mission is mind-boggling. They want to be adjunct professors, they want to be part of the semiconductor mission, some people want to be advisors. So that reverse brain drain trend is alive and growing significantly. To people who ask me this, I give one classic example. There is a gentleman whose name you should remember. His name is Jim Keller. He was the chief AI scientist for Tesla. And he left Tesla. He was a AMD GPU architect. And he decided to set up 2 startups for the next generation of AI compute devices, chips. Guess where he set it up? Not in the Silicon Valley. He set it up in Bangalore. 2 startups. Completely manned by some Indians from the US and Indians in Bengaluru and India. So, cutting edge startups to design the next generation of AI chips are today being built and built by people who are legends in this space. And Jim Keller is not a small guy. He's like, when we think of Andy Grove and these names, in the AI compute space, in the AI space, he's a legend. And he has started these startups. So, everybody understands the talent for the next generation of innovation, the next decade of innovation will be from India. We want this not to be just about talent, we also want this to be about intellectual property ownership. We want the startups to be here.
Go ahead.
Hi, good morning, sir. This is Shalin from Financial Express. So you mentioned about, early in your conversation, you mentioned about Google becoming something bigger than a way to crawl the web. And then you also mentioned about AI compute capabilities. In that context, I recently read a commentary, which was very interesting, that a lot of search queries and other kind of queries are now originating outside of Google and ending outside of Google. Shopping platforms such as Amazon or messaging platforms such as WhatsApp. With the AI coming in, that will increase, that will happen more and more. So the so-called Google tax will be redistributed. So part A, what's your take on that? And part B, was Sam Altman really wrong when he said that when it's really hopeless to compete? Because even if that happens, that migration of so-called Google tax happens, how much of that will really flow into India? Because it's not only a question of innovative minds, it's also a question of AI compute capabilities and the billions of dollars, or at least hundreds of millions of dollars that is required.
So to be fair to Sam Altman, and I actually also reacted to that statement of his, but he has since clarified that that's not what he meant. He was not saying that, no, the Indian startups can't do it. He was saying something else in a different context, and he has since clarified it, so I think we should just let it rest. In my opinion, if you are a smart techie or a person in the technology ecosystem anywhere in the world, you cannot but have a reasonable amount of respect for what India is doing and what Indian startups are doing. I always use this quote of the digital minister of UAE, Al Olama, and he says, the fingerprint of India and Indians will be on everything and everywhere technology in the future. So, that is the respect that people have. So, I don't think Sam Altman meant it that way. I also, in a misguided way, responded to that, and he has since clarified that. In terms of, look, the power of Google and how much dominance they have on the way we crawl the internet, it's a known fact. I think competition authorities all around the world have expressed concern about this. The Indian CCI recently talked about market dominance and abuse. So it is for Google to evolve a model that is a lot less worrisome to competition regulators around the world. I don't have a view on it. It is for them to do it, and competition regulators otherwise will send them a small note saying, look, we are worried.
But this safe harbor, specifically, something that we've discussed a lot, and what's your view on it? It was something that they used, not Google, but all...
Yeah, I think the concept of a safe harbor, Anant, emerged at a time when the concept of the internet was a lot more simplistic. Therefore, there was the internet and there were these dumb pipes that connected the consumer to the internet, and therefore the pipes or the platform said, don't involve me
Hands
with
up,
what the... So that was a time and a place for that. I would argue today that it is time for us to revisit that assumption, and maybe we should look at safe harbor in extremely rare, exceptional cases where it's up to the platform to prove that they have absolutely no control on what goes through their platform or what is in the pipe, and they have no moderation ability at all. And that section 79 should be an exception rather than a general rule as it is in today's framework.
Perfect. Yes, please. Lots of questions there. Yeah, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Anant. Mantriji, I have two small queries. I am from the field of agriculture. One is there are 3 techniques and technologies in the world. The GMO, genetically modified organism. Second is CRISPR-Cas9. It's a genome editing technology that you can change any part of DNA, any living being. And third is the AI. I call these 3 techniques, they are the 3 last nails in the coffin of existence of humanity. I have developed a theory on this, and I can prove it. India being a responsible state, we should have a international group how these technologies can be properly used, because this creativity ultimately will end this world and not God or anything else. My second small query is that why India cannot develop a chat GPT for farmers, so that chat GPT Kisan, so that all the need of the farmers in the field of agriculture, he is the only person in this world who creates economy. Everybody else manipulates it. So that he gets all these needs, requirements of doing agriculture at one place. Thank you very much.
Yeah, no, so you're making some suggestions, and I have absolutely no problem with that. I'm agreeable to that, excepting, like I said, the government is not in the business of creating a chat GPT. We will certainly create incentives in these 3 centers of excellence. One of the centers of excellence is going to focus on governance and agriculture applications, and this is certainly one idea for that.
Please go ahead.
I'm Parimal from Financial Express. You addressed the Twitter issue briefly. The Congress is clearly not convinced by the clarifications or the statements that you've given out. The Congress president, in fact, has gone out and said that the allegations made by Jack Dorsey are actually what the BJP has borrowed from the British, and what he specifically termed it as the toolkit for dictatorship. How would you respond to that? And part B, your ministerial colleague, Mr. Anurag Thakur, he referred to the statements by Mr. Dorsey, and he said that such statements, such foreign forces, get more active closer to elections in India. Would you agree to that?
On the first part, look, I'm not in the business of making the Congress agree with me, certainly not. And whether it was the 2G scam where they said it was 0 loss, when I said privacy is a fundamental right, they said it is not. When I said Section 66A infringes on people's rights, citizens' rights, they said it's not. So I think there's a long history of the Congress disagreeing with our government and our views. So that is what it is, and therefore that is why they are at X seats and where we are at 300 plus seats. So that I think the people of India agree with us, and that is our mandate, that is our goal, that is our mission. And certainly it's to not make Kapil Sibal, I don't know which party he is in today, but certainly that is not high on our priority to make Rahul Gandhi see reason or Kapil Sibal see reason. On the issue of why Jack Dorsey says what he says, or has said what he has said, so close to Indian election or so close to the US election, that is a question for which many people have many speculative thoughts on it, including some that are angry, some that are dismissive. And I think it is for Jack Dorsey to clarify why he is lying, because what he said is an outright lie. And if the Congress wants to agree with that lie, the lie is that he says people were jailed, that Twitter was shut down. And I am saying today that 2 years where they were non-compliant and violative of Indian law, the most that happened to them is that they got letters from METI. And so if we had an opportunity to take them down, shut them down, or send them to jail, the opportunity would have been when they were violating Indian law. And they consistently violated Indian law for 2 years, till June 2022, when they actually then started complying with law. So it is, as I said yesterday, it is a lie, it is a falsehood. Why he is using falsehood, I am not in the business of reading Jack Dorsey's mind of all people. And it is for him to clarify. But I'm pretty sure that everybody has a fair degree of speculation that there is something more to it than meets the eye. But that is for him to say, not for me to conclude.
I think we'll take a last question, but can I get from a woman, please? I think only men have asked questions so far. So any woman who wants to raise a hand?
I am Piyush from DigiVancy. Actually, working with the several local SMEs, we found that like they also need a cloud ERP. But there is a concern over there, like local SMEs store owners, ki when they like use the third-party ERP, like so how do they feel safe their data is? Because when they use the on-premises ERP like Tally and all, they feel that like it's data in our computer and all.
बहुत legitimate question है ये, बहुत ही, this is a very clear, fair question, and that is why the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill will cast an obligation on all the downstream providers, cloud providers, infrastructure providers, that they have to comply with this personal data protection, and that if they breach data, wittingly, unwittingly, whatever, there will be punitive financial consequences and penalties. तो ये जैसे मैंने कहा, इस बिल के बाद बहुत ही गहरा behavioral change और responsibility का एक culture बन जाएगा, and that everybody will take a very, very deep look and a very careful look about handling personal data.
Okay, I think we're out of time, but I'll quickly do a rapid fire.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, just quick, and keep it light and fun and short. Skill, entrepreneurship, or IT? Which one do you spend more time with?
All of them. I can't say that I spend time in one because I lose the job on the other one. So I spend equal time on all.
The last question you asked ChatGPT.
The last question I asked ChatGPT was to describe the EU regulation on AI.
Okay.
And I did that about a week ago.
Okay. Jack Dorsey or Elon Musk, who do you prefer as Twitter CEO?
I really don't. I mean, from our point of view, it doesn't matter who's the CEO. As long as a company complies with Indian law, we love the CEOs and the management. I don't really have a view. I said this on Twitter some months ago, that it doesn't matter who the owner of a platform is. As long as the platform empowers and enables Indian citizens and complies with Indian law, we are happy.
Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla, or Elon Musk, CEO of Twitter? Who is easier for Indian government to handle?
No, I think for me, certainly CEO of Tesla is a very target-rich CEO, because we would certainly like Tesla to come to India and manufacture. So if you ask me, where would I send my Christmas gifts to or my Diwali gifts to, I will target the CEO of Tesla.
Big tech or big pharma? Which of these two bigs need more regulation?
I think all companies that are big, dominant, have a large customer base and consumer base have to have oversight. And I can't say one of these two, because pharma I don't understand too much. But certainly I think big tech and those who have the power to distort the openness of the internet need oversight and regulation.
American regulation on big tech so far, poor, acceptable, good?
No, they are laggards in this. I think India and the Australia, EU, we are certainly leading the way of regulating the future of tech more than the Americans are.
You mentioned Australia, so I can't resist asking, because in my industry, Australia championed some protection for news from platforms. Will we see some similar?
No, we certainly believe that this needs to be discussed, that the asymmetry between those who control monetization and therefore control the advertising money versus those who create content. And in India, content creators with 1.2 billion Indians online are going to be in the millions and thousands. Yes. So we certainly believe there should be less asymmetry, less power being used in those negotiations, less arbitrariness, and there should be some conversation around evening that asymmetry. We will see during these DIA consultations.
Okay. And since you are a politician as well, and you know, not just a techie and a corporate, so one lesson you've learned from the recent electoral loss?
I don't think there's one lesson. There's many lessons, and I'm still learning those lessons. So, and I'll keep it as my lessons that I have learned, and our party has learned, and I won't necessarily share it with you.
Rajeev, thank you so much for your time. There couldn't have been a better inaugural address for this Digital Bharat than you, and for being as candid as you always have been. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Shri, Rajeev, Chandrasekhar ji and Anant. That was indeed a very interactive, informative address. Thank you so much.